myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. And Tuesday night means it's Liam Kennedy night. Good evening, Liam.
Evening.
I'm meeting myself coming back this week. It's my birthday week, so I'm doing seven interviews in 7 days. It's going to get tricky now because I've got to go to the some of the guys who live abroad, and it's time differences and things, and it's balancing my show and balancing the loaded show, and dear me out. But we've had some cracking interviews. Gavin Peacock, Rob Lee and Lee Clark so far. Absolutely superb. Some great content and some great questions from people out there. Putting it out on Twitter and getting the ones on the live chat has been great. And, normally you get the same old questions. I mean, the T-shirt one comes in with Lee Clark, or, there's always a question about Shearer with Rob Lee, or Gavin Peacock, do you regret leaving? It's always usually the same questions, but been some absolute belters on them interviews. And I'm hard picked to say which has been the best one so far. I mean, I love speaking to the lads anyway, but fantastic mate so far. And we've got Nobby Solano lined up for tomorrow, Warren Barton lined up for Thursday. So a big birthday week for us, mate.
Quality. Love the Rob Lee one. It's brilliant. He was my first real sort of Newcastle United hero. Absolutely loved him. Fantastic midfielder. Everyone out there knows how good Rob Lee was. And a top bloke as well, looking at the interview that you did with him the other day. Fantastic. Aye,
and we've had Big Al on, which is massive, and he's coming back. So the problem I'm going to have there is which show he comes on, because I'm getting it in the neck from the girls, getting it in the neck from the lads. I want to be on that show, so yeah, it'll be interesting. I might have to draw names out of a hat, I think. But welcome along anyway, mate, and great to have you on. Plenty of questions always. This is how it works on a Tuesday night. You get your questions in. Liam gets through as many as he can, and whether it's player related, takeover related, just get those questions in. I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts of that performance at the weekend? Fantastic, Liam. What a result. Got out of jail as well, 9 men, and still managed to hold on and get those 3 points.
Do you know what, Steve? Saturday afternoon was just an incredible experience in a lot of ways, because for so long now at Newcastle United, the feeling hasn't been there. Like the emotion has disappeared from watching Newcastle United. It's become a chore rather than a pleasurable experience, which it was previously. And it's like that heart. And I found myself almost having to pinch myself halfway through that. It was about 10 minutes to go. I was literally screaming at the computer screen, going mental. I was also working at the same time, little bit unprofessional. But I realised in myself, I thought, we've got that emotion back. I can feel it again. There's something to get behind here, and a lot of that was to do with the nature of the game itself. But even taking away the drama of the second half, that mad 5 minutes, there's so much more to this team now, and it's been an incredible week and a half or so. I mean, you probably could point the turnaround to that second half against Leeds, but the big turnaround was Everton, as we all seen. And then, like I said, I was on here talking about Crystal Palace, and I said I didn't think that was as bad. Or was that? Well, I haven't been on since. I didn't think Crystal Palace was as bad as people made out. I really didn't. I thought the first half was decent. I thought they were arguably better in an attacking sense against Palace in that first half than they were at Everton previously. And then to follow that up with a win. They needed a win. And in the circumstances, everything that could have possibly gone wrong for Newcastle United went wrong in that second half, and in the first half with the injury to Callum Wilson, which I'm sure we'll come on to at some point in the show. But yeah, it had the feel of maybe a month ago. That would have been a game Newcastle would have went on to lose quite handsomely in that second half when things started to go wrong. You lose 3 players to injury, go down to 10 men, go down to 9 men. It was just and concede that goal within sort of 5 minutes, 2-3 minutes of the second half. Having been in what felt like a comfort zone at half time. And yeah, I just think for me it was more than that. It was more than 3 points which we needed. It was about a reconnection emotionally, and I think there was a real. I felt it. I'm sure you did. I think everybody did out there. I've spoken to a lot of people about the game since, and the amount of outpouring of emotion that there was towards television screens or wherever you may be watching it, devices, was quite incredible. And like I say, I just roll the clock back. I'm saying a month. It's not even a month. Roll the clock back 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And where was that emotion? It disappeared. a lot of people who watch Newcastle United religiously, who I speak to, some people weren't even watching Newcastle United anymore. They didn't want to watch it. It was terrible. It was rubbish. It was boring. That's gone now. They've got a little bit of that emotion back, and hopefully they can keep on top of that and keep moving forward. Look, they've got a hard week with the 2 games. Chelsea next week, Manchester United after that. It's not going to be easy. And you look at the fixtures elsewhere, and you think the gap could well be less than 10 points. I think by the time we come round to a winnable game, which I'm going to say that Wolves is a very winnable game in my opinion, because they're really struggling this season. They're not the Wolves of last season. But until Newcastle United come round to that game, the gap could be back down to what it was before. It could be back down to a 6 points or something like that, because there are games. I think if you're a Fulham, I'll say here rather than West Brom. If you're a Fulham, you've got to be looking at the next couple of games that they've got. I think they've got. Correct us if I'm wrong, Steve. I'm sure they've got Sheffield United in one of the next 2.
Yeah.
And I think if you're them and you're going to stay up and you're going to stay in the division, while the next 2 for Newcastle United are really tough, the next 2 for Fulham are games you'd have to get points in if you want to stay in this division. So I would argue that I think we could be in another sticky situation in about a week and a half's time. But I think we've seen enough in the last fortnight to suggest this Newcastle team isn't finished yet. It was hard to see where the points would come from, and now I think it's easy to see that we can pick up points because of this new formation, because of the switch around in tactics, in approach, in pressing, just looking like a more attacking side, and it's been really refreshing, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, Chelsea, Man United, and then Wolves and West Brom. The key games for us as well, if need be, back end of the season, well, last 2 games, Sheffield United, of course, and Fulham. So, I saw enough at the weekend, and that win was vital. I don't think Newcastle will go down now.
No, I don't. I think you talk about the fixtures from memory. Those last 2 games could prove crucial, but hopefully it won't matter by then. But there is a run of about 4 games previous to that, which are real tricky games against your Leicesters and I can't remember off the top of my head, Manchester City.
Man City's the 3rd last game, but I mean, they'll have, by the way they're playing, they'll have the league wrapped up by then, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, Newcastle there's a little run of games after this too, where they've got, like you said, the likes of Wolves, they've got the likes of West Brom, even Tottenham. They've got some games in there where you wouldn't write Newcastle off and say they've got a half a chance in these games. So that's when they need to pick up the points. A little bit of talk this week. I went over some stats. Some people out there might have read it, might not. Check out my Twitter feed if you didn't. But we did it. I did an analysis of the last 10 years, how many points it's taken for teams to stay in the Premier League. And last season you were looking around 35. I would say the mean has been about 35, 34. There has been the odd one. Obviously, Newcastle United went down with 37 when Sunderland stayed up. And going back 10 years, I think Birmingham City went down with 39 points. But apart from like little anomalies like that, then 34, 35 normally keeps you in the division. Newcastle United are only 9 to 10 points away from that now. And I would argue that this season, with the points tally that, say, Fulham have got, Fulham are going to have to, in the last, whatever it may be, 16 games, they're going to have to more than double. They're going to have to do better than what they've done in the 22 games so far. They're going to have to double their points tally to even get close. And I just don't see them doing that. Look, they could go on a decent run, but again, a decent run with an extra win or 2 added in only takes them to 35 points or so. And I would back this Newcastle team to at least pick up another 2 to 3 wins between now and the end of the season.
Okay, we could talk about that game all night, but we're not going to. The questions, as always, flying in. Over 550 watching. Thanks very much. Honestly, we never take your support for granted, and really appreciate it 100%. In that case, with all of you watching, I just want to say thank you to the sponsors. Spider VPN, of course, our sponsors for this month. Big shout out to our friends at qtechshop.co.uk as well. Makers of pool tables and snooker tables and walls in Newcastle, who also make our t-shirts and our lovely mugs and our Supermac t-shirts, which you can get from newcastlelegends.com. If you're a first time visitor, subscribe to the channel. Just hit that little badge in the bottom right hand corner and you can subscribe. It is free. Click like if you like the video, that does help us as well, and click share, that shares it out to your Twitter or your Facebook or your LinkedIn or whatever. That does help us as well to help build the NUFC Matters community, which is a year old this week. Let's get to the questions then in the chat. As always, plenty to browse through. Albert Mooney says Ben Jacobs thinks the EPL would have the stronger case in a court battle, but thinks it will be settled before that happens. What are your thoughts, Liam?
It's hard to say who would have without really being party to the nitty gritty of the court documents and evidence on both sides. It's impossible to say who would have a stronger case. Look, I know there is a confidence from people involved in this that they think they would absolutely smash the Premier League out of the park. I'm sure there are people in the Premier League's legal team who probably think exactly the same thing. But yeah, I'm going to be a bit diplomatic on that. It's impossible. Ben may well have seen documentation from both sides. I don't know. But for me, I haven't, and I can't say for certain who would have more confidence in a court battle. Do I think it could be settled before? Yes, and I would think that's the biggest hope for everybody for this takeover is that it does get settled before that, because if it really pushes on into a court battle, then that's when timeframes become really difficult. They become really tricky because it's a lot longer term. Settling before an arbitration, going to an arbitration, settling post arbitration is the much preferred option for everybody involved. A court battle wouldn't be, because a court battle could take some time.
Okay, Tom Dixon says, Liam, what's your thoughts on this? When it broke last night, Saudi Arabia Football Association President visiting Qatar Football Association President in Doha. Yeah, I mean, this was all over social media last night. So Tom preempted the fact that I would have the photos saved. But there they are, socially distanced with their masks on. Joining more dots, Liam, or just something which has no real effect on the takeover?
Look, I think any reconnecting of those two countries at any level can be taken as a positive, in my view. But does that directly have an impact on the takeover? Not at this moment in time. There are certain things that need to happen. We've talked about them on here, not just myself. Other people who've been on have spoken about the idea of legal things being dropped, legal battles having to be having to be finished effectively, or at least put on ice for certain other things to move on. And I think until we see that, that's kind of the hard evidence, the hard updates that everybody's waiting on, because once that happens, and if that domino falls, I do believe that there are that would take away certain legal hurdles that there are preventing this takeover. Takes away certain legitimate arguments that some may have against others. But do I believe that those two meeting together is a negative for the takeover? Certainly not. No. I think, like I say, any thawing in relations, any coming together of those two nations has got to be a positive thing, because ultimately that was one of the biggest sticking points was the BN issues, the problems that the media war that went on, the mudslinging, all that kind of thing. It all added to the narrative and made it very difficult for that deal to pass. And I do think it'll be much easier without those legal hurdles in the way.
Stu Taylor says, any news on Callum Wilson's injury? Any time frame?
No, not unfortunately. I know I understood. I was hoping we might have got something today, but because I understand people are really, I'm anxious to know, and unfortunately I don't know. Look, Shaw doesn't look like a great one. Manquillo doesn't look like a great one either. Ankle and knee ligaments potentially with both of those two. Callum Wilson's the main man though, isn't he? He's the one everybody wants to be in the squad, and I think we'll just have to wait and see with that one and see how things settle down. We're speaking to Steve Bruce on Thursday this week. It's a little bit earlier, so hopefully we'll get an update towards then.
Leslie Marr says, Liam, your piece today sounded far more downbeat than you were in December. Are you really, or am I reading too much into it? NUFC takeover.
Yeah, I think it's easy to read too much into it. Look, the whole point that I was told by my desk today, have you got anything you can write? I had a bit of fun with it. I went down the Simon Garfunkel Sound of Silence route. And that's effectively what it is. It may have sounded more negative to everybody than may well be, but it's just simply it wasn't positive or negative. It was just effectively underlining the fact that we're all playing a waiting game. It's not only you guys out there who are frustrated. The frustration remains on the buyer and seller as well. They wanted this deal done yesterday, never mind, in a week's time or months' time. So there is frustration there from everybody. Everybody wants this deal done, but with the legal cogs turning, these things are taking time. There's certain things that need to happen that need to fall in place for other things to happen. If one thing goes too early, it could spoil another thing. There's lots of balls in the air. Effectively, I'll be the king of cliches again as well. But there are lots of balls in the air, and it's impossible to know which one's going to drop. And all I was trying to do with the piece today, Leslie, was effectively say, it's a waiting game, and we've got to be patient. There is a silence. I don't want people running down the road of thinking that I've heard it said before about takeovers, about when it goes quiet, that means it's happening. Something's going on and happening. I don't want people to run away down that avenue and think, oh right, it's gone so quiet now, that must mean it's going to break any day now. I don't really want people to do that, because in a way I was urging caution, just to say, look, it's quiet, but that's not quiet in a positive or negative way. Look, it was a bit of a halfway house piece, but as long as you enjoyed it, Leslie, that's fine. But it wasn't particularly in a negative light, nor would I say a positive one either.
No, Paul Oxley said, he says, I said to you on Twitter, Liam, 3 more wins should do it. You think bottom 3 now will be the ones that go down? I mean, Lee Clark today, obviously former Fulham player, talked, honestly, as he always does. He feels that despite the great effort by his good mate Scott Parker, he feels they're down, and I think he thinks that Sheffield United and West Brom will go with them. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I suspect it does look that way. It would take a remarkable turnaround. Look, we've seen a big upturn in fortunes from Sheffield United, and all that's done is get them on terms effectively with the other two at the bottom. It would take a fantastic end to the season, which we haven't seen from Sheffield United for some time. If you remember, during the first lockdown, Sheffield United dropped off a cliff. But the form that Sheffield United have shown was in that first 6 months in the Premier League, and they've never got anywhere close to that since. So I would suspect they'll have to go somewhere close to what they were like at the start of their return to the Premier League to get anywhere close. Of the other two, everyone kind of expected West Brom to have a little bump, the Sam Allardyce effect. But I've got to be honest, when you look through their squad, it really is a championship squad. It's very difficult to pick a Premier League player out of their squad and take anybody who you would put in our team. So I think he's got a real tough challenge on his hands. Will they have a little bump at some point? Look, he's done it everywhere he's gone, so I'd expect Allardyce will do something at some point this season, and he'll turn that team around. They'll have a little run. But is it going to be enough? I don't think so. Fulham are the ones who I would look at and say they're the best team of the 3 by quite some distance, but lack a goal scorer, struggle defensively at times, and it's never a good recipe. But I would say of the 3 teams that Newcastle have played, of those 3 this season, I would say I was most impressed with Fulham. Can they do it? I think they've probably left it a bit too late. I would say they haven't won a game, I think, since October or November. So you'd think that'll have to change soon, and that's what I mean. In the next week or so, if they're going to have a little fight, they'll have to do something. And I would suspect Fulham in the next 2 might pick up that elusive 3 points, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a reason to really panic. I still think they'll struggle to put a run of wins together that they're probably going to need to give themselves a fighting chance at the end of the season. So in short, I went the long way around there. In short, I think probably the 3 look like they're going to go, and they look like they're going to go quite comfortably. I'd be surprised if any of them, again, hold this at the end of the season. I've got plenty wrong before, so I might get this wrong, but I'd be surprised if any of them break 32, 33 points this season.
Barry Hogan wants to know if there's any chance that we could recall Kellen Watts from Plymouth. He's having a blinder, he says.
Yeah, they could recall him. You could recall him and he could come back. He wouldn't fit in. He doesn't fit into the 25-man Premier League squad, so he could effectively come back and be involved. I'll be honest, I think they'd be really reluctant to call him back because the lad's probably best served just continuing to play games in League One for Plymouth. He's doing well there. What will be the point in taking him out? I don't see the reason. At the moment, Newcastle United are fine. did a little piece yesterday again, looked down my timeline on Twitter, you'll be able to dig it out. And there was a defensive options available. Look, there is a little bit of a hope that Federico Fernandez could be back next week. And we're talking about Monday. We're still nearly a week away from the game itself. So, and I would argue that Kieran Clark will be back, and Paul Dummett is probably a better centre half than he is left back. So for me, there's two centre halves you could easily play on that side, with a relative degree of just be really comfortable. Isaac Hayden would be the other one as well. For me, I would take Isaac Hayden out of there. I think he's been fantastic when he's played there, to be honest. Really, really impressed me. But I want him back in midfield. I think he's best served in that sort of the deeper of the three midfielders in this system. I think that role is perfect for him. So I would love to see Dummett come in and Hayden just push that a little bit further forward. And we'll just have to stick with John Joe Shelby because the manager seems to like him.
Andy Barr says, good evening, who's doing more towards the team, Bruce or the manager? And Joe Walker says, Liam, is this the Jones effect, or is this Steve Bruce's gloves off approach, or is it a bit of both or something else? I mean, it's been a bit of a debate online. I mean, I mischievously put a tweet out, of course, at the weekend just about that situation, and that, you know, is it any coincidence that Graham Jones has come in and suddenly there's a change in formation? But somebody flipped it round and said to us, well, you know, Bruce has been quite cute here because a couple of weeks ago he said the gloves were off and he was going to change things, possibly knowing that Graham Jones was coming in. So, you know, he can claim that it's his, you know, it's him doing it. And speaking of the former legends as well, they've essentially said, well, you know, they've all got different views. You know, obviously we all know Rob Lee's not a Graham Jones fan, so he's putting it down to Bruce. He is the head coach. Is this more down to Steve Bruce than Graham Jones? What's your view?
It's actually something that I've been deliberating myself recently. Obviously, we know the situation with Graham Jones. Steve Bruce was involved in that process. There is no doubt about it. But I'm not 100% certain it was necessarily his choice to bring a coach in to freshen things up. That's the difference. I think people have got to understand. It wasn't some planned to push Steve Bruce out of the job. It was to freshen things up, but I don't think that was necessarily his approach. And I've got to say, you've got to give Steve Bruce a little bit of credit. I would hold back on giving him too much credit because we've had 18 months of dross, absolute dross with no identity and no idea. And it is very coincidental that all of a sudden with purpose since the new coach come in. And I don't think that is coincidental. And I do put a lot of the credit onto the new coach, onto Graham Jones for coming in, bringing some fresh ideas. That squad were playing like a team who were not enjoying their football anymore. It may even just be that things up. Look, I know he's been involved in certain attacking drills. He's been involved in set pieces. He's been involved in press. He's been involved in a lot of other things. The press, I mean, is in football and press, not the media, of course. But so for me, I think Steve Bruce does deserve a little. He does deserve a little bit because I would say that you could probably push the transformation in the team goes back to half time. I would say at Leeds. So I think there were signs were there in that second half against Leeds that there was time they could try and turn something around. There was a bit of fight there, a bit of intent. But the real transformation came at Everton, and it was no surprise that Graham Jones was on the touchline, had done 2 full days training with them, had worked on a lot of things, and there was a fresh approach, fresh ideas, a totally fresh look. Steve Bruce had tried every single formation in the coaching manual, but he hadn't tried that one. So it's no coincidence, is it, that suddenly a new guy comes in with fresh ideas to switch it up and it works. Look, he tried everything else and it didn't work. So that's why I'm holding back on giving Steve Bruce too much credit in that sense, because I do put a lot down to Graham Jones.
Okay, Craig Elrington, he says, did you see Ben Jacobs say that he thinks the Premier League have a better chance of winning if it goes to court? What do you think, Liam? And Raymondo is asking if we saw the interview. Well, neither of us have. I know, just obviously down to the fact that, you know, we all do other things when other podcasts are on. Sometimes we can watch them, sometimes we can't. I would point most of you in the direction of Andrew Musgrave from the Chronicle. Andrew interviewed him a while back and then, you know, rather mysteriously had to take the interview down. Not sure why. Maybe he's ask Andrew. Is this guy the real McCoy? Is he somebody who's got a finger on the pulse in the Middle East? I don't know. I don't actually know the guy. So I have spoken to other people. I know Steve Hasty and Mitch have have a bit more information on him. So maybe we can ask them the question on the Three Amigos on Friday. But as for me, I haven't really got an opinion on the guy. I don't know him. I don't know what his credence is. I've seen a lot of criticism online of him, and I've seen a lot of the stuff that's come from his interview this week. So, I think the jury's out. He knows as much or as little as most people, I think, with regards to this takeover. I think he's certainly got sources and people who will give him information. But we can't really speak about Liam, can we? Because we haven't watched it.
No, like I said, it's not something. It's an hour and 10 minutes. I don't have an hour and 10 minutes in my day. We're fitting this in and doing full-time work and kids and family and everything that goes along with sort of time that we're living in at the moment. And look, good luck to them. Good luck to the other podcasts. It takes a lot of time and effort. I see the work that you put in, Steve, even just coming on here, the commitment that you have to bring to this. So good luck to anybody who's doing a podcast out there effectively. But I will be watching it. Ben puts a lot on Twitter. When he just tweets and things like that he puts a lot of detail out there, so I think everything's there. I don't think
he conducts himself well. I mean, there's been some people in this takeover farce, and I'll call it a farce because it's dragged on for so long. It's become a farce, and I've actually enjoyed the last 10 days. I haven't had to speak about it. No one's asking any questions about it. It's just died a death. To be honest, I'm quite happy with that. And until there's something to talk about, I've said on this show the last few nights, it's been great not speaking about it because there isn't really anything to say. Nobody is saying anything. It's like you said in your article, the sound of silence. But this was obviously going to kickstart it again. I knew it would when I saw that he was going to be doing an interview. But yeah, he conducts himself well on social media. And, the big question is, which the fans would ask is he genuine? Is what he's saying coming from a good source, And who knows? But look, I would take everything that everybody says with the takeover with a pinch of salt, because the buyers and the sellers will both be speaking to different people at different times, and who knows what's going to happen. I know whose side I am on, and I know whose side I'd like to win, but if it doesn't, the football club will still be there. We'll still be talking about it. We'll still have a football team to support. It just means we won't have as much money as we hope we would. It's as simple as that. That's where I'm actually at now with the takeover, and fingers crossed it goes through. Let's move on from that, because it does start to, it takes over. It'll dominate the show, and we don't want it to do that. There's so much to talk about. Yano says, honest question, who of our centre-backs would be the first choice at any other Premier League club? It's a good one, really. I mean, we've obviously been hit with a load of injuries, Liam. To the back four. Devastating, especially for Sav on a Monday night to see Shaw out for the rest of the season. But you talk about Fernandes potentially coming back. Kieran Clark, of course, wasn't injured. He was at the hospital, waiting for his lass to give birth. Jamal Lascelles, of course, splits opinion. But is there any other centre-backs do you think would be first choice at any other Premier League club?
I think when you talk about Newcastle centre-halves probably being the strongest position with the goalkeeper that they've got, it's probably more an average set of defenders who are all of a similar level and are all pretty good. That's the way I would describe it. I would say that people like Federico Fernandes would get in a lot of teams at our level, bottom half Premier League. He's probably the best of the bunch that we've got. But you could say the same of Fabian Shaw. Probably get in a lot of sides as well. Jamal Lascelles would probably struggle. I know he would have a lot of takers if he suddenly became available, but and I think looking beyond that, there's a lot of fans of Florian Lejeune out there. Like I said on here last week, it wouldn't be a surprise if he isn't seen at Newcastle United again. Unfortunately, I do think he's a good player. I think he would get in some sides. Kieran Clark is what he is. He's our level, but I really like him. And again, I think it's more, if you pick out individuals, it's probably a little bit unfair on the strength and depth that Newcastle have in that department. I think Newcastle have got real strength. That they've probably got a group of about 4, 5, 6 central defenders who are all pretty good. They're all good. They're all Premier League defenders. And I think you would probably struggle to go around most football clubs in the Premier League and find that sort of strength and depth in one particular department.
Yeah, okay. Liam, if Newcastle did go for Joe Willock at the end of the season, would Arsenal consider selling them? Asks Tom Dixon.
Again, good question, Tom. A little bit guesswork on this because we don't know what the situation or how things are going to play out. But I would imagine because they've let him go, that he is surplus to requirements. I know it's an area that having let Ozil go that Arsenal are really keen to strengthening, and they brought the Norwegian lad in. They've got Smith Rowe as well, who's really well thought of and has been fantastic for them this season, to be honest. And I think it's really difficult for Joe Willock to go back to Arsenal and get in the side. That's why I would imagine that they will probably consider his future in the summer. Could it be another case of sending him back on loan? He is only 21, turns 22 before the end of the season. Yeah, there is a possibility he could come back out on loan. But I would imagine Arsenal probably look to sell him. And the big question in the summer is, will he have enjoyed his time at Newcastle United? Or will he want to roll the dice somewhere else? It's a long way from home. I know that was one issue that Mikel Arteta talked about a little bit. And he is a player that will attract other clubs if he does reasonably well at Newcastle. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But I'd imagine he would probably cost a fair amount as well. He's a young England under 21 player. You would imagine he's probably going to be north of 15 million to sign. It's just whether Newcastle would want to spend that kind of money and the player would want to stay here. But yeah, I would be surprised if he ends up having a long-term career at Arsenal, simply because of the way things have gone for him at this point, and the type of signings and players that Mikel Arteta is using in that department have almost been at times anybody but Willock in recent times. And it's a shame because he's a good lad. You can tell that by the interviews that he's done. And he wants to come here and really prove himself, but I'll be very surprised if he stays on at Arsenal and has an impact there. Look, let's not get too excited here. It's one game. I always think back to Kennedy. When you think about the impact that Kennedy had in that first month or two, and we were shouting the ball, and Newcastle wouldn't sign him for 25 to 30 million. Let's wait and see. Let's just let the lad play and enjoy him, and hopefully has a really good spell. Helps us, and then the summer it'll be whatever it'll be, and we'll see what happens with him. But I would imagine he'll probably be available again in the summer.
Martin Colley's asking, do you think Graham Jones would be retained on the coaching staff if the club was taken over?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's always necessarily the case that everybody gets booted. So I think we've seen that previously. We've seen the likes of Ian Cathro working with Rafa Benitez. I'm just thinking back to the previous manager. Wasn't his man and ended up working with him for a year or two till he got the Hearts job. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise us if a Graham Jones was brought in on that proviso that even if things move on, that he might stay on in some capacity.
Ferry Hill Mag says, what do you think of ASM owning the Mackhams today on Twitter? It was quite funny, actually. The Mackhams, some Mackham fan was giving him a little bit of stick. So he just put a tweet up essentially just saying it was basically the Premier League calendar looking for Sunderland season after season, when it just was a guy running through this tunnel just looking left and right continuously. It was quite funny.
He was. He's good on social media, like, isn't he? He's a character.
Yeah, he has certainly taken that mantle from anybody else on social media and made it his own at Newcastle. Ron Bennett says, has Alex Bruce blocked you on Twitter yet? He blocked me and I've never even mentioned his name. He's blocked me, Liam.
I have no idea. I don't think I follow him, to be honest. So I've not even checked. I best when we come off the show, I'll have a little look to see if he's blocked us. I've honestly no idea. I've not said anything against him. I've never had a conversation with him, so I'd be surprised if he has. I've
never said anything, but I think what he was doing was he was going down the hashtag NUFC timeline, seeing who was involved in hashtag Bruce out, and I've got to be honest. I know you weren't, but ultimately that's probably why he's blocked a few people. John Spence says, Luke Edwards said Steve Bruce would have walked if Jones had been brought in behind his back. What do you make of that? Not Luke Edwards' comment, but the fact that that still won't go away. A lot of people do feel that Jones was brought in to help Steve Bruce and help keep Newcastle up by Lee Charnley and Mike Ashley as opposed to Steve Bruce.
Look, Luke is really close to Steve Bruce. So you've got to take what he says as gospel in that sense. that comment does surprise us. It does surprise us that Steve Bruce says he's a Newcastle United fan. He's from the area. We know that as well. He's always talked of, I don't walk away, I don't do this, I don't do that. So then all of a sudden, just because it starts to get a bit tough and the people above you don't want to sack you and would bring someone in behind your back, this is all hypothetical, by the way, that he would then walk away. No, I don't think. I'd be quite surprised if he did. I wouldn't. You'd get the gloves on, wouldn't you? I know you talked about taking them off, but you get them on and you'd come out fighting if that was the case. So I'm surprised by the comment. But I get it. I get the idea that it would be undermining the manager and his decision making. But let's be brutally honest about this as well. That's working on the idea that Steve Bruce has ultimate control over what happens at this football club. He really doesn't. He doesn't have ultimate control over signings. He doesn't have ultimate control over the football inside of the business. This isn't the sort of carte blanche that was handed to Benitez at one point during his time. Didn't work out very well, unfortunately. Shame that it didn't. But Steve Bruce has not been brought in on that proviso. So if there's decisions taken around him that people come into the football club, signings are made because of recommendations to do with the scouting network or people that the football inside of thing might be speaking to outside of the football club, then Steve Bruce has to accept that, and he largely has as well. So yeah, I don't get it. I don't get that comment. Look, it's got to be true because Luke said it. Luke is mates with Steve Bruce, so everything he says, if Luke's saying that, then I believe Steve Bruce is probably thinking that, or has intimated that, or said that. So I'm. But
he was never going to walk away. He's never going to walk away because all that money. You know what I mean? He might have said it in anger, maybe. I don't know, but I do believe it anyway. Gary Hannon suggesting that maybe Frank Lampard's a possibility for Newcastle if Steve Bruce goes the journey. Is that somebody you could see travelling to Newcastle to become manager?
Yeah, I think. Look, I don't think it'd be the worst appointment in the world. I think he's proven himself in certain departments at Chelsea really well. It was probably just a bridge too far for him, too early in his career. But yeah, I don't see why somebody like that in time couldn't come up here and do a good job. I think most people would be open to that.
Mark Henderson says, so our top goal scorer, Callum Wilson, goes off injured. You'd think a manager would bring on someone who could score goals in Gale. Yet Bruce brings on someone who can't. Joe Linton. Why? Yeah, a lot of people scratching their heads over that decision again. Dwight Gale, for somebody who's his favourite player and who he wanted to sign time and time again, can I get a look in?
It's been we've talked about it a lot on here. It's been a really strange situation with Dwight Gale. For somebody that about 2 months ago was talking about he would do everything within his power to get him a new contract, and he's barely kicked the ball since. I was looking at some statistics on how many minutes have been played recently. And Dwight Gale is one of the lowest. He's been fit now for a good 3 months. He's been fit since probably the start of December, and he scored one goal. Never really had much of an opportunity beyond that. There's more going on here than's been said, and he needs some game time. Look, I go back to the Joe Linton decision. I'm not a Joe Linton fan. I think he offers very, very little. And I think most people probably tend to agree with that. I don't think I'm saying anything out of the ordinary here. I can kind of see why he decided to bring him on in that game at that time. Because playing that system where you're not replacing a central striker in Callum Wilson. Callum Wilson was effectively playing off the right-hand side. So I can see why you would probably think, look, I've played Joe Linton a fair bit out wide and he'll do both jobs. There's less question about whether Dwight Gale does both jobs. Does he drop out to the right? And you might have to change more about the system if you bring a Dwight Gale back in. But as players, individuals, I would have Dwight Gale every day of the week over ahead of Joe Linton because they're different class, in my opinion. But I can sort of see the system, how he might have had to adapt other players. Maybe it would have taken a little bit away from Almiron had he brought Dwight Gale in. I'm not sure Dwight Gale is the same as Callum Wilson. Wilson has played a wide role quite a bit in his career, hasn't always been a central striker. Dwight Gale hasn't. He hasn't played that. He's always been a central striker. So I can kind of see where the Joe Linton decision came from. It's just a shame he didn't have a better player to bring on in that position. And I think moving forward, realistically, in this system, I think you'd even be better off if he'd brought. I think if it'd been later in the game, he might have brought on Ryan Fraser, for example. And I know that's playing without a recognised striker, but I think you could have done that, and I think you could even do that away from home at against or one of the top sides against a Chelsea or Man United, because I think he'll offer you a lot more off the ball than what Joe Linton does. Joe Linton's very one-paced. You're never going to coach that out of him. He's just really slow in his thought processes, slow in the way he turns, slow in his touch, everything he does. Even when he'll chase somebody down for a tackle and the bloke will have passed it 5 minutes earlier and then he'll foul him and you're like, come on, man. I mean, I don't know how anybody thought that lad would ever be sharp enough to be a Premier League footballer. And Dwight Gale is sharp enough to be a Premier League footballer. But in the system, I can see why he brought Joe Linton on.
Joe Linton not slow at putting photos on social media when he's getting his hair cut at the barbers, though, during a pandemic. Barry Hogan says, is this just another crappy news story? Newcastle are seen as one of the most likely alternatives for investor Joseph de Grosser if Southampton do not lower their takeover asking price. More mischief by the media, that, do you think? Just another red herring in amongst all the other red herons?
So, I'm just looking at my phone here because I've actually got a reply which I haven't printed from the PR people at JACP Sports because I've asked the question of them today. I put a story out this afternoon saying, look, what's the situation? This is what the situation is. I've seen this, and these have been tweeted. So he has a little comment. There'll be no public comment, but it's seen as, I'm not quote verbatim because it's a private conversation, but the idea is that it's just Newcastle are one of a bunch of clubs that would be seen as a good choice to buy. Now that's very. There's nothing actually happening. Is also confirmed that obviously the thing with the De Grosser stuff is that the guy tried to broker a deal in 2019 for the football club, arm in arm with the likes of Peter Kenyon, and it was the full GACP Sports setup. They couldn't come to an agreement. They did have talks. They did do the due diligence. They went down the road, employed certain bodies to be involved and do checks and things like that. All the financial stuff was there, but the big fear, and I don't know this is a fact, the big fear I've got with GACP Sports is that it's another Burnley. It would effectively be another. It'd be another purchase from somebody who outright does not have the funds to buy a football club. I'm not saying he hasn't got the funds in general, but doesn't have the funds to put into a football club and then spend again. I think there'll be a lot of borrowing, a lot of leveraging, and I think there's a real concern whoever he does buy. Look, we're talking about not wanting to pay 160 million for the shares of the Southampton owner. He owns 80%. So he doesn't value it Southampton at 200 million. Mike Ashley wants 300 million plus for Newcastle United. Of course, it's a bigger club, is valued accordingly. But the problem is that if he can't put that kind of money down without leveraging and lending, which we're seeing a lot now. We've seen it at Burnley, we've seen it at Derby, we've seen it at Sunderland, we've seen it from a lot of football clubs that these buyouts. Manchester United is probably the biggest high-profile one that these clubs are bought and then they're basically bought on future revenues and things like that. I can't go into the complexities. I'm not a financial guy, but it's really complex and wrong, to be honest. That's what the owners and directors test should be there for. It should be looking at people like this and saying, can you afford the football club and can you keep them running with your money, including the money that's brought in from the football club. But it doesn't seem that that's the case. And I would have big reservations about GACP and Joe de Grosser buying the football club. So in short, the answer is, was it said? Yep, it was. I think it was a Matt Slater article in the Athletic. It was mentioned Newcastle United in passing, but I genuinely believe it may only be in passing. That Newcastle United are mentioned. He has had talks before. They couldn't come to an agreement. And the most important thing about all of this is that Mike Ashley is only entertaining one bid for this football club. Is the only bid that has ticked every single box for Mike Ashley. And the biggest box in that one, the biggest box is that they don't want to. It's not a buy now, pay later deal. It's a deal that how much do you want for the football club? Right, well we'll give you the money for the football club. It's not a case of right, well we'll give you 50 million now, and then you'll get 50 million a year's time, and that's the kind of thing, the kind of arrangement that Kenyon and GACP Sports deal was involved in. I just don't have any confidence that that's any different to what we have now. In fact, it's probably similar to what we have now, where the club would run itself. There'll be profits taken from it, and we'll probably have more risk that if things went wrong, there wouldn't be a benefactor effect. Benefactor is the wrong word. I was nearly going to call Mike Ashley a benefactor there, but there wouldn't be somebody willing to sort of take on the issues if you get relegation. Somebody willing to bankroll it if things go wrong, and that would be the problem. So it'd be very similar to what we have now, but just with no bloke standing there saying, right, well, I'll put 100 million in to cover for a season till you get back on the Premier League.
Yeah, big shout out to DNS Insurance as well. A good friend of mine, Neil Harvey. I've just stuck the link in for his business. They look after insurance needs from the most basic insurance to large complex insurances. Done my insurance for Newcastle Legends for many, many years. So please give them a look if you get the opportunity. Rob asks, would you take Adam Armstrong back considering we have 40% sell-on clause? Are the club looking at that deal?
It's not something, to my knowledge, that they are looking at. But would I take him back? Look, I was always impressed with him. I was disappointed when he was allowed to leave the football club. I think it was probably a bit too early for him. I don't think his development was best served in Newcastle United, and I think that's why he's needed to go elsewhere to do a lot of the learning that he missed out on when he was younger. He was plucked from the reserve setup, the youth setup at the age of 16. By Alan Pardew, brought in far too early. I think he needed time away from the club to play games. He needed looked after. I don't think he was, and I think it's taken him to move away from Newcastle to really come on and develop as a footballer. And all credit to him, because I think he is a fantastic footballer. There were signs there when he was a young lad and when he got chances at Newcastle that he could be a good player. And if Newcastle got that 40%, as was reported in the Chronicle by Lee Ryder, which you have to believe that we have. If they're going to sell him for 15 million and it's only going to cost Newcastle United a fraction of that, 40% less than that, look, I think that's a bargain. I think that's a bargain for a local lad who you're bringing in who scores goals in the division below. I don't think that's a massive risk to take. If you're letting a Dwight Gale go, for example, and you bring in somebody like that, I think that wouldn't be a bad move for Newcastle to make in the summer. But a lot of that depends on the people who are interested in him as well. I know West Ham made a decent play for him in January, and I think they'll probably come back in the summer.
Yeah, lots of people asking stuff about players. Nicola Dolby just says the Gale situation is like Matty Longstaff last year. It's all about him signing a new contract. I agree with you 100% there. Mark Anderson wants to know what's happened to Matt Ritchie. Can't even make the subs bench. I just do not understand that one.
Look, he was away, wasn't he? That's the thing. He was totally gone. He was away. He was going back to Portsmouth. Going back to Bournemouth, and I think that's where his head's at. I think he would have quite happily gone down to Bournemouth, and it's a shame that deal didn't happen, really, because I think there was a lot of things dependent on it, and things would have moved on elsewhere for Newcastle in the transfer window if that deal had got signed off.
Lots of people saying congratulations for being 1 year old. Thank you very much, Joe. Saying, just wanted to pick up something you said earlier about NUFC. Matt has been 1 this week. Wow. Massive thanks again for all your efforts during this extraordinary time. Legend indeed, mate. I'm not a legend, mate, but thank you very much for your kind words. Means a hell of a lot. And, we'll continue to do what we do best. Somebody did ask a question. I just want to go back to it if I can find it in the chat. I'll find out who asked it. But it's just somebody asking about Rafa, just saying what's he actually waiting for, Liam. Oh, here we go. Tom Dixon again. What sort of job do you think Benitez is waiting for? Is he waiting for the takeover to be done, or is he having a well-deserved break?
It's a hard question to ask unless you're going to ask Benitez himself, isn't it? Look, we've talked about him here before. Let's deal with the things that we do know. We know that he is the consortium, PCP consortium's favoured candidate to take the role. Should they get the green light to take over Newcastle United? But I've talked about it on here before. Is Rafa Benitez the type of person who would wait around for too long without work? I don't believe he is. He's not that type of person. He's a grafter. He wants to work, and I think he'll take a job when he can take a job. I think that's the biggest risk with that. I wouldn't necessarily pin that. I wouldn't pin all your hopes on if Benitez takes another job. That means the takeover's dead. They're not intrinsically linked like that. But it is. We are at a point whereby if it happens quite soon, I think Benitez will hang on. if we're looking at a court battles which could take a year, for example, and everybody in the consortium is willing to hang on that long, which we don't know as fact, then I think we're probably looking at Benitez would take a job. There'll be plenty of people want Benitez because he's a fantastic manager. He's proved himself all over Europe, and I think he would go back into Europe if he gets the opportunity. He would prefer to stay in the Premier League, of course, but if the right job doesn't come up for him in the Premier League, I think he'll take a risk elsewhere. And we've just got to look at Benitez's career, really. If you look at it briefly, that he has taken risks and he's jumped in jobs that other people might have waited and not taken. China being one of them, Newcastle particularly being another one as well. It was a risk, a big risk. He does that though, and he takes risks because he wants to work. He looks at teams and thinks he can change things, he can affect them. And it wouldn't surprise me if Benitez, even though he might have had word, and we don't know that for a fact, we know that he is the favoured manager for the consortium. But even if he's had word, if a job comes up and there's no end in sight for this deal, then it wouldn't surprise me if he took a job elsewhere. Look, I want him to come back. I think he's the exact perfect person to come to this football club and rebuild. It'd be really difficult for Newcastle United in the event of a takeover going to pluck a top manager and bring them here and say, okay, go on then. They'd have to come in on the idea that they have to rebuild the football club from the bottom up. They have to rebuild the infrastructure. They have to put the pillars back in place, get the academy sorted, revamp a training ground, then probably redesign a brand new training ground that would have to be built elsewhere. Just put an ethos, a way of thinking into the football club. And that's why, for me, that Benitez, having spoken to him on a regular basis when he was the manager, that's kind of who I want to come in here, because I know he's got those ideas. He could come in, he'd hit the ground running because he knows the football club, he knows a lot of the players, and he knows what needs improved. And I think that's why he'd be absolutely ideal.
Yeah, Trolls says maybe Martinez is waiting for the takeover. A lot of people reading a lot into Graham Jones coming, and of course the link up that they had in the internationals. Nicholas says, can you ask Liam if he had any crack with Keith Patterson this week?
Yeah, speak to Keith regular. Like I say, we're started as contact, we're mates now, so we do speak on a regular basis. Keith's keeping things ticking over. He's got his own things going on at NCSL, and people who think that nothing's happening on that front are really mistaken. Things are ticking along. Just things. The legal cogs are moving in a number of directions, and it's all very confidential and private, as it should be, as it has to be at this point in a process. So I can't answer questions for Keith, but have I spoken to Keith? Yeah, I've spoken to Keith regular basis. I spoke to him 20 minutes before I came on this show.
Well, there you go. You can't get much better than that. A lot of mix on Rafa, of course. Looney Tune Daz says, I wouldn't want Rafa back if the takeover happened, because all we would get is Bruce Benitez comparison again and again. Which I understand that. Joe says, get Rafa on. I have asked. Unfortunately, no response on that yet. But never say never. I would imagine that that is something that might happen at some point. We've got Alan Shearer. Adam Telford says, Mike Ashley's not doing this deal because he cares about us. He's doing it because they're the only ones willing to pay over the odds for us. Because realistically, we're only worth 250 million. Barry Ingham, we did answer that question earlier, but it is possible we could get him to come back if that was possible. Chippers, good evening. He says, takeover or no takeover, do you think this summer will be a massive one at Newcastle? That's a wide open question, that, Liam. Will it be a big summer, do you think?
I think it'd be a big summer, but not in the way that you're probably hoping for. I think the financial implications of the last 12 months will really bite Newcastle United, bite the balance sheets, and I think it might be a little bit of a struggle. I don't think you're going to see the free spending kind of thing that we've seen not last summer but the summer before. I think you're going to even struggle to see the kind of spending that we've seen last summer. My opinion would be that it will be a big summer, but not for the reasons that you kind of hope.
Okay, lots of comments coming in about Rafa. Chippers says, do you think that Mike Ashley could replace Bruce this summer even without a takeover?
If Newcastle United stay in the division and continue on the pathway that they are now, Steve Bruce isn't going anywhere while Mike Ashley's owning the football club.
Yeah, okay. Stuart asks me a question. He says, congrats on the podcast's first birthday. Which one of your podcasts has been your favourite and which episode has been your favourite? All right, okay. So you're putting us in a bit of a position there. I've got to be honest, the Liam ones have been a surprise. And I think both of us would agree on that because, when you put people together, me and Liam were pals anyway. I'd done a couple of Shields Gazette podcasts, Mouth of the Time podcast, but we didn't really know, whether it would take off, and we're blown away. Over 700 watching on a regular basis live. And then, it gets on a regular basis anything from 3,500 to 5,000 views a week. So people appreciate Liam's honesty. So I would say probably this one is my favourite one to do, which was completely unexpected. The Three Amigos is special because it's me two pals. It's me and Steve and Neil, and we get guests on, and whether it's Alan Shearer, whether it's Keith Patterson, whether it's Ian Mearns, that's become like a Friday night ritual for a lot of people during COVID. So the Three Amigos is special, but it's difficult to pick one. I love them all. I love Ladies' Night because it's so random. It's a laugh. It's so funny to do. You never know what's going to happen. It was frowned upon at first. Ooh, ladies' night, it's a bit sexist. It's not. It is what it is. It's a ladies' night with all the girls on, and I'm hosting it, and that's turned into a great little show. And I'm immensely proud of the fact that Kendall and Alicia, who's come along, they've got their own channels. They're starting to sprout off and go and do their own stuff. But Super Mac and Gibbo was the initial concept. 2 years ago, really, when we did pilot episodes, and it didn't really take off. They were good. That was a good laugh to do them, and they're always good to have them on. I know that's much appreciated amongst some of the older Newcastle fans. And then to have the worldwide lads, come on and chat and do the match day lives again, something which other people were doing, but people have bought into our way of doing it with so many people on. I'm just really surprised how well it's taken off, and I am humbled by the whole thing. That we've managed to get through a year. People keep saying, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to progress? I don't know. I didn't plan this. You know what I mean? We did it because we wanted to cheer you lot up. I wanted to cheer myself up. I enjoy talking about Newcastle, and I hope that comes across. I'm not an expert. I'm not somebody who is in the know. I'm just somebody who has got more contacts than some and less contacts than others. But I enjoy talking about Newcastle, and I think that's why the shows all work. And nothing better than spending these days during this horrendous period talking Newcastle United and speaking to fans, speaking to journalists, and speaking to ex-players. And you lot enjoy it, and for as long as the lockdown and this horrendous situation continues, and as long as I'm fitting well, I'll continue to do it. So thanks for all your birthday wishes. We'll go with one more question, if there is another one, and there's so many congrats coming in, which is great. So thank you very much. Here we go. Craig Southgate. Look, lads, it's not about the price. You also pay for the potential. They have a plan, and this club has a lot more potential than the clubs that are left to buy. They said all will be revealed. Well, I think that's good, isn't it? It is true.
I think so. I think that for me, if you look at the two almost, I know it's a well-coined phrase, but sleeping giants in the Premier League at the moment, I would say it's Newcastle United, Leeds United, one city clubs. They've got massive fan bases, a massive reach, and I think if you're a person looking to invest in the Premier League from the outside in, I think those were the two that you would look at and say we could really develop. Leeds in a very similar situation, Newcastle United in an infrastructure sense, in a fan base sense as well. But obviously I'm biased. I think most people out there, Newcastle United is a much better value football club because the top and bottom of it is it's a bigger football club, much bigger football club. That's my opinion on it. But I was going to mention, Steve, you talk a little bit. I know we're going to run over time, but my favourite show of the last 12 months that I've been on here with you has been one of the first ones you ever got us on, because people might not remember it wasn't a regular thing. Our show wasn't set to be Liam's coming on every Monday, Tuesday, whatever. It was just I would come on whenever, and you put us on with Super Mac, and we did a lunchtime show with Super Mac, and I was just totally in awe that I'm sort of with with a legend, somebody that my dad absolutely adores, you know what I mean? And as I was brought up on stories of Supermac, and that was probably my favourite. But I think people forget that it wasn't a planned thing, was it? It was just something that it's been organic, and it's grown throughout the months into something that it is today. And there's a full community. People support you out there on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever it may be. And all credit to you, Steve, because you this is your baby and you created it.
Thanks very much, mate. Much appreciated. And yeah, long may it continued. Colin Wilson, one thing is for sure, when this takeover happens, there'll be one hell of an NUFC Matters party. Great show, lads. Yeah, we've still got our Christmas party to have, which people have paid for. Hopefully we'll be able to increase the numbers, though. Tomorrow, I am doing 2 shows again. Slightly different times, guys, because of countries' time coordinates and different times. So, all being well, Nobby Solano will join us at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And then at the slightly later time on Thursday, I'll be joined by Warren Barton. That will have to be at 8 o'clock because where he is in the States. Don't forget, tomorrow night as well as Retro Night, we'll be looking at matches between Newcastle United and Norwich City tomorrow. Some great stories already lined up. And of course, Thursday night sees the return, hopefully, of John Gibson after his dental work, and Supermac. They've both confirmed, so hopefully they'll all be fine. And don't forget as well, on a Wednesday night, the lads Martin and Daz and Chris will be back with their Loaded Football Weekly, which looks at Newcastle United free zone, really. It looks at world football, it looks at football from around the world, other teams in the Premier League, and have their weekly quiz as well. So well worth dropping into that. If you haven't tried it, give it a go. It's well worth a watch. Liam, just give a little plug to where people can find you, mate.
Down here, Liam Kennedy 20 at Liam J Kennedy 23. That's where you'll find me. We also do our own podcasts. I work for the Shields Gazette as a Newcastle United writer. We do our own podcast, Mouth of the Time Pod. You can follow that on Twitter too. We do one of those once a week. Probably be out tomorrow. So yeah, I work for the Shields Gazette. We work on a subscription model. We don't go for all the clickbait stuff. You might have read some of my stuff. If you like it, you'll normally get 4 or 5 stories a week. If you go over that, it's a small subscription fee. And for quality journalism, I don't think it's a real bad thing to have to pay for it. You pay for everything else. It costs you the same as a coffee for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it may be. So I don't think it's that bad. If you like the content, you like the thing that I do on here, then I'm pretty sure you probably like the stuff that I write in the Gazette as well. So yeah, it'd be good to see some subscriptions come from this kind of thing, because ultimately that's what pays the wages, and the world's got to go around, doesn't it?
It has, mate. Great stuff. Good to have you on as always, mate. Another great show, another positive week. Please give the show a like, please give it a share, and please subscribe. Just hit the little banner in the bottom right hand corner to subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a donation, click join as well. You can join the channel, become a member. Gives you the option of having some little emojis, etc. You'll have seen them on some of the people in the comments. Big thanks to Gary Hannant, who's donated another £5 to the food bank as well. Much appreciated, mate. Liam, see you next week, mate. It'll probably have to be Wednesday because we're playing Monday. The girls will have to move to Tuesday, so we'll see you next Wednesday, mate.
Right, see you.
Take care, mate.